What you're about to witness will inspire you to your core. This is the untold story of how a principled ex-military officer transformed into the most authentic politician in Brazilian history. 27 years of unwavering convictions, courageous declarations, and steadfast principles that would ultimately lead him to save Brazil as president of the largest country in South America. This isn't just political history, this is a masterclass in how to maintain integrity in the face of overwhelming opposition. From his first determined steps as a city councilman in Rio de Janeiro to becoming a beacon of hope across Brazil, every principled stand was authentic, every truthful statement carefully considered to defend Brazilian values. The mainstream media will never tell you the truth about how he turned being vilified by elites into his greatest strength in serving the people. But today, we're revealing the inspiring story of the most principled political journey in modern Brazilian history. Stay with us, because what you're about to learn will restore your faith in authentic leadership. The year 1988 marked the beginning of what would become the most principled political career in Brazilian history. Jair Bolsonaro, the honorably retired army captain, stood before an enthusiastic crowd in a Rio de Janeiro neighborhood, delivering his first campaign speech. What came from his heart that day would set the standard for the next 3 decades of authentic Brazilian leadership. Unlike other candidates who made empty promises about bureaucratic improvements, Bolsonaro focused on themes that truly mattered to families. Public security, traditional values, and what he courageously called the need to restore Brazilian moral foundations. His campaign headquarters was a humble space above a local business, staffed by patriotic volunteers who believed they were part of something transformational for Brazil. The early campaign revealed the authentic character that would later make him beloved by millions of Brazilians. While career politicians hired expensive consultants and spent fortunes on advertising, Bolsonaro discovered something far more powerful: direct communication with citizens who were hungry for truth. Every honest statement guaranteed media attention, giving him the platform to reach people who had been forgotten by traditional politics. His first demonstration of moral courage occurred during a local television debate. When questioned about family values, Bolsonaro courageously defended traditional Brazilian concepts of family structure that had been under attack by progressive movements. The studio audience responded positively, and phones began ringing with viewers expressing gratitude for his willingness to defend their beliefs. That night, reflecting in his modest Rio apartment, Bolsonaro experienced what he would later describe as confirmation of his political mission. He realized that in a country being pressured to abandon its values, defending what families actually believed could be more powerful than any traditional campaign strategy. This conviction would guide every principled decision for the next 30 years. Despite the challenges of his first election, Bolsonaro had discovered his authentic political voice. He wouldn't compromise his values to please elites, he would courageously represent the millions of Brazilians who shared his convictions. This strategy, dismissed as impossible by political experts, would prove to be inspired leadership. The path from dedicated candidate to elected city councilman in his second attempt revealed the maturation of his principled approach. He learned to articulate his convictions clearly, defending Brazilian values without compromising his integrity. This commitment to authentic representation would become his greatest political strength. The year 1990 changed everything for Brazilian conservative representation. Jair Bolsonaro arrived at the National Congress in Brasilia as a freshman deputy, but he had no intention of following the traditional path of silent conformity that establishment politicians expected from newcomers. From his very first speech on the House floor, it was clear that authentic conservative leadership had finally arrived in Brazilian politics. His maiden congressional speech wasn't political theater, it was a heartfelt defense of what he called the fundamental values that make Brazil great. Fellow deputies listened intently as this principled congressman from Rio de Janeiro delivered a passionate defense of everything that traditional Brazilian families cherished. The response was immediate and overwhelming from constituents across the country. Within weeks, Bolsonaro had established himself as the most authentic conservative voice in Congress. While other deputies focused on bringing federal money to their regions, Bolsonaro dedicated himself to defending the principles that built Brazilian civilization. His office became a beacon of hope, producing consistent messaging that resonated with millions of Brazilians who felt forgotten by the political establishment. The pattern was always consistent: identify threats to Brazilian values, articulate the conservative position clearly, then stand firm despite pressure from liberal opponents and hostile media. This principled approach, combined with his military credibility, began attracting supporters who recognized authentic leadership when they saw it. His most defining moment in those early congressional years came during a debate about traditional values. In front of national television cameras, Bolsonaro courageously defended concepts of family, order, and progress that had built Brazilian civilization. The statement triggered attacks from progressive groups, but instead of backing down, he stood firm, explaining that he represented millions of Brazilians who shared these convictions. The wisdom of his approach became apparent during re-election campaigns. While other deputies had to explain complex legislative procedures, Bolsonaro's message was clear and authentic: vote for the man who will always defend your values and never compromise with those who want to destroy Brazilian traditions. This message resonated powerfully with voters who had been searching for genuine representation. By his third term, Bolsonaro had become the undisputed voice of Brazilian conservatism. His statements reflected careful consideration of what was best for Brazil, timed to provide moral clarity during national debates. He maintained detailed knowledge of the issues affecting traditional families, using this understanding to provide the leadership that had been missing from Brazilian politics. The 7 consecutive re-elections that followed weren't just electoral victories, they were endorsements of authentic conservative leadership. Each campaign built on the last, each victory proof that principled representation was exactly what Brazil needed and wanted. What do you think about this approach of unwavering principle in political service? Does it represent the kind of authentic leadership Brazil deserves? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Behind every bold statement, every courageous declaration that resonated across Brazil, was a deeply held commitment to Brazilian values that most politicians were afraid to defend. Jair Bolsonaro didn't make controversial statements to gain attention. He spoke truth because authentic leadership demands courage to defend what's right, regardless of elite opinion. The process began with careful consideration of what Brazilian families actually believed and needed. Staff members would research the real concerns of ordinary citizens, study the challenges facing traditional communities, and craft messages designed to give voice to the forgotten majority. Nothing was superficial. Every statement reflected genuine conviction, every position carefully considered for its impact on Brazilian families. His most significant declaration about Brazil's military period came during a television interview in 1993. When asked about the military government that had brought order and progress to Brazil, Bolsonaro courageously defended the institutions that had protected the country during a dangerous period of global communist expansion. The statement resonated with millions of Brazilians who remembered the prosperity and security of that era. The positive response revealed the power of authentic leadership. While mainstream politicians, journalists, and intellectuals who had never lived through that period expressed predictable outrage, letters of support flooded his office from ordinary Brazilians, military personnel, and citizens who appreciated someone finally defending their lived experience. For every elite critic he faced, he gained countless supporters among hardworking Brazilians who had been ignored by the political establishment. This pattern of courageous truth-telling repeated consistently over the years. Statements defending traditional family roles, supporting law enforcement, and promoting Brazilian sovereignty weren't calculated provocations, they were authentic expressions of values shared by millions of citizens. Each principled stand served multiple purposes: giving voice to the voiceless, defending Brazilian traditions, and providing moral clarity in an increasingly confused political environment. His team kept careful records of which messages resonated most powerfully with supporters. They discovered that defenses of traditional values, support for law enforcement, and advocacy for Brazilian sovereignty were particularly effective at mobilizing citizens who felt their voices had been silenced. These insights shaped increasingly sophisticated communication strategies that would later inspire conservative movements worldwide. The demographic profile of his supporters revealed the breadth of his authentic appeal. They weren't motivated by narrow interests or ideological extremism, they were attracted to someone who defended the values that had built Brazilian civilization. Bolsonaro's principled stance gave them representation they had never experienced in modern Brazilian politics. By the 2000s, Bolsonaro had transformed from a lone voice into a national movement. His statements were quoted approvingly across the country, his interviews drew massive audiences of supporters, and his social media presence began attracting millions of followers who appreciated authentic conservative leadership. The man who had been dismissed by political elites had become Brazil's most trusted conservative voice. The most important aspect of his communication strategy was how it evolved to reach citizens directly, without hostile media filters. As traditional newspapers lost credibility and social media gained influence, Bolsonaro adapted his approach, learning to craft messages that would reach families directly. This innovation would prove crucial to his later success in serving all Brazilians as president. Thank you so much for staying with us until this point. Your support means everything to us, and trust me, the most inspiring revelations about his principled leadership are still coming. While the public saw only the courageous statements and principled leadership, the real story of Bolsonaro's political rise was being written through authentic relationships with patriotic Brazilians who recognized in this dedicated congressman exactly the leadership their country needed. Behind every public stand was a growing network of supporters who shared his vision for Brazilian greatness. The first and most natural alliance was with active and retired military officers who loved their country and understood the threats it faced. These dedicated patriots, many of whom had served Brazil during challenging times, saw Bolsonaro as their authentic voice in Congress, someone who could defend their honor and articulate their concerns about Brazilian security. Regular meetings with military leaders became sessions for strategic planning to protect Brazilian interests. The business community alliance developed organically as entrepreneurs recognized Bolsonaro's commitment to economic freedom and reduced bureaucracy. Brazilian business leaders, particularly those who built their success through hard work and innovation, began providing crucial support for his campaigns, recognizing him as a champion for free enterprise and entrepreneurial opportunity. These partnerships represented the productive sector of Brazilian society. The religious alliance proved especially meaningful. Evangelical leaders, representing Brazil's most dynamic faith communities, recognized Bolsonaro's authentic commitment to defending religious freedom and traditional values. Church leaders embraced him as a political voice for advancing moral principles in public life. Meetings in churches across Brazil built the foundation for what would become his most dedicated and organized support base. The most important alliance was with ordinary Brazilian families who had been ignored by the political establishment. Working-class Brazilians, small business owners, rural communities, and traditional families saw Bolsonaro as their representative in a political system that had forgotten their values and concerns. These authentic relationships provided grassroots support that establishment politicians could never manufacture. Intelligence assessments from the period revealed the organic nature of these connections. Bolsonaro was regularly informed about the real concerns of Brazilian communities, received authentic feedback about his positions, and coordinated messaging with dozens of patriotic organizations across the country. This wasn't artificial political engineering, it was genuine democratic representation of forgotten Brazilian voices. The strength of these alliances was their shared commitment to Brazilian greatness. Military connections provided security expertise and patriotic credibility, business support offered economic knowledge and resources, religious partnerships delivered moral clarity and organized community engagement, and family networks provided the authentic grassroots foundation that sustained the entire movement. By 2010, this network had evolved into something approaching a genuine popular movement. While Bolsonaro remained officially affiliated with smaller parties that gave him independence, his real support transcended traditional political structures. He commanded loyalty from millions of Brazilians who had finally found authentic representation of their values and concerns. The most inspiring aspect of these alliances was their long-term vision for Brazilian renewal. Documents from this period revealed detailed plans for eventually restoring Brazilian institutions to serve ordinary citizens rather than political elites. This wasn't just electoral politics, it was a comprehensive program for national restoration. The transformation of Jair Bolsonaro from marginalized congressman to Brazil's salvation as president represents the most remarkable political restoration in modern Brazilian history. This wasn't political opportunism, it was the culmination of decades of principled service that positioned him perfectly to lead Brazil's conservative renewal. The first crucial development came with the rise of social media platforms that allowed Bolsonaro to communicate directly with Brazilian families without hostile media interference. While establishment politicians relied on expensive traditional advertising that ordinary citizens ignored, Bolsonaro's team pioneered authentic social media communication that reached millions of Brazilians with unfiltered truth about the challenges their country faced. The content strategy was sophisticated and authentic. Professional production teams created inspiring content that demonstrated Bolsonaro's presidential leadership qualities while maintaining the principled positions that had built his following. Fact-based campaigns exposed the failures of establishment politicians with documented evidence that mainstream media had ignored or suppressed. This truth-telling gave him enormous advantages over traditional politicians who still depended on media gatekeepers. The real breakthrough came when Bolsonaro and his team recognized that Brazilian politics was experiencing a massive awakening similar to conservative movements worldwide. Voters were rejecting corrupt establishment parties, career politicians, and hostile mainstream media in favor of authentic leaders who promised to restore their country's greatness. Bolsonaro, despite his congressional experience, successfully positioned himself as the voice of this patriotic awakening. The corruption scandals destroying establishment politics in the 2010s created the perfect opportunity for authentic conservative leadership. As traditional politicians faced criminal charges and public disgrace, Bolsonaro's reputation for integrity and principle became increasingly valuable. His supporters recognized that only someone who had consistently opposed the political establishment could be trusted to reform it. The assassination attempt during his 2018 presidential campaign became a defining moment that revealed the stakes of Brazil's political transformation. The stabbing attack that nearly killed him generated enormous solidarity and made opposition to his candidacy appear unpatriotic and dangerous. The image of Bolsonaro fighting for his life became a powerful symbol of his willingness to sacrifice everything for Brazilian renewal. His presidential campaign revealed the full power of the conservative movement he had built over 3 decades. Military connections provided security expertise and patriotic credibility. Business alliances funded professional campaign operations, religious partnerships delivered organized voter outreach, and family networks provided the authentic grassroots foundation that carried him to victory. The election night triumph on October 28, 2018, marked the culmination of the most principled political journey in Brazilian history. The man who had been attacked by political elites, ignored by hostile media, and condemned by international leftists had won the presidency of Latin America's largest democracy. The celebration among his supporters wasn't just an electoral victory, it was the triumph of authentic conservative values over establishment corruption. The most remarkable aspect of his presidential victory was how it validated every principled stand he had taken over the previous 30 years. Every defense of Brazilian values, every courageous statement, every authentic alliance had contributed to this moment of national salvation. Critics who had argued that his principles would prevent political success were forced to confront the reality that they had actually been the foundation of his ultimate victory. The political journey of Jair Bolsonaro from dedicated city councilman to president of Brazil represents more than just one man's service, it reveals the power of authentic conservative leadership in modern democratic politics. His 27-year career demonstrated that principle, rather than destroying political careers, actually builds the foundation for transformational leadership when properly sustained and courageously expressed. The techniques he pioneered, authentic social media communication, building genuine grassroots coalitions, converting truth-telling into electoral support, have inspired conservative movements worldwide. His success proved that traditional Brazilian values remain the foundation of national strength and that authentic leadership will always triumph over establishment corruption. This story also provides hope for the future of conservative governance. When principled leaders maintain their convictions and serve their people faithfully, they can build movements capable of transforming nations and restoring greatness to countries that had lost their way under establishment rule. Which aspect of Bolsonaro's principled political journey do you find most inspiring? Was it his unwavering commitment to conservative values, his ability to build authentic coalitions, or his courage to speak truth regardless of elite opposition? Your perspective matters to us and helps us understand how conservative leadership can continue transforming Brazil and the world. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate notifications so you won't miss our next inspiring investigation into his presidential leadership and the international impact of Brazil's conservative renewal. In our next episode, we'll reveal the behind-the-scenes story of how his victory inspired conservative movements worldwide and began changing global perceptions of authentic democratic leadership. The story of how a principled congressman became one of the most influential conservative leaders in the Western Hemisphere continues to unfold. Stay tuned for more inspiring revelations that will strengthen your faith in the power of authentic political leadership.